The day I discovered my inheritance was gone started like any other. I was reviewing property records for my grandfather's land, 500 acres of seemingly worthless desert in Nevada that he'd left me 5 years ago. Except the records showed a different owner, Desert Sun Development LLC. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. This had to be a mistake. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 32, I was about to uncover just how far my mother-in-law would go to control her son's life and destroy mine. "It's done," Patricia's voice cut through my shock. I turned to find her standing in my home office doorway, perfectly coiffed as always in her designer suit. "Really, Sarah, you should thank me. That land was just sitting there, dragging down my son's potential for success." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "You sold my inheritance? How is that even possible?" She smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Power of attorney is such a useful thing, especially when one knows the right people at the right banks. Robert should never have married beneath his station, but at least now I've salvaged something from this mess. Robert, my husband of 6 years, was at work, completely unaware of what his mother had done. Or so I thought. "Does Robert know about this?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Patricia's laugh was sharp as glass. "Of course he does, dear. Who do you think signed the final papers? He agrees it's for the best. That land was just another sign of your humble beginnings." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Robert had known, had helped her, but they didn't know everything. What Patricia and Robert didn't realize was that for the past 5 years, I'd been investigating that worthless land. My grandfather, a geologist, hadn't been senile when he left it to me, as Patricia constantly implied. He'd been brilliant. 3 months ago, I confirmed what he'd suspected all along. The land sat on one of the largest lithium deposits in North America. I'd been quietly laying groundwork, setting up meetings with mining companies, preparing for the moment I'd announce the discovery. And now they'd sold it. My inheritance, my future, my chance to prove I was more than just the gold digger Patricia accused me of being. But I hadn't spent years studying geology and business management to crumble at the first setback. "Thank you for your concern," I said calmly, closing my laptop. "I'm sure you did what you thought was best." Patricia's triumphant smile faltered slightly at my lack of reaction. "Well, yes, I did. For Robert's sake, of course." "Of course," I echoed, standing up. "Would you excuse me? I have some calls to make." She left, clearly disappointed by my composed response. She'd expected tears, pleading, maybe even threats. Instead, she got calm acceptance, which I knew from experience would disturb her more than any emotional outburst. The moment she was gone, I pulled out my phone and called Marcus, my grandfather's old friend and my secret business partner for the past 3 years. "They sold the land," I said without preamble. "What? How?" "Patricia. She somehow got power of attorney. Robert helped." Marcus swore softly. "The lithium deposit. They don't know about it," I cut in. "They think they sold worthless desert. I need you to find out who Desert Sun Development LLC really is. And Marcus, we need to move fast." I spent the next hour making calls, activating contingency plans I hoped I'd never need. By the time Robert came home that evening, I was ready. He found me in the kitchen, calmly preparing dinner as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't just helped his mother steal my inheritance. "Mom said she talked to you today," he began, loosening his tie. "About the land sale." I kept chopping vegetables, my movements precise. "She did. Sarah, you have to understand. That land was just sitting there, not generating any income. Mom found a buyer willing to pay good money for it. It was the sensible thing to do." I set down the knife and turned to face him. "And you didn't think you should discuss this with me first?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You're too emotional about these things. It was your grandfather's land, I know, but sometimes we have to make hard business decisions." "Hard business decisions," I repeated. "Like forging documents to sell property that doesn't belong to you." "No one forged anything," he protested. "Mom had power of attorney." "Power of attorney that was mysteriously granted 2 weeks ago, according to the documents. Tell me, Robert, how did that happen when I was never even asked about it?" He shifted, avoiding my eyes. "Mom has connections at the bank. She expedited things. She committed fraud," I said flatly. "And you helped her. Don't be dramatic. He scoffed. It's done now. The money's been invested in some of Mom's real estate ventures, much smarter than holding onto desert wasteland. I thought about the geological surveys hidden in my private cloud account, the mineral analysis reports, the preliminary contracts I'd been negotiating with mining companies. All the work I'd done in secret, knowing Patricia would try to interfere if she found out. How much? I asked. What? How much did you sell it for? He smiled, clearly relieved I was asking about money rather than ethics. 2 million. A great price for land like that. 2 million. The lithium deposits were worth billions. I see, I said, turning back to my vegetables. And I suppose Patricia's real estate ventures are doing well. They will be, he said quickly. Mom knows what she's doing. I bet she does, I thought. Just not as well as she thinks. That night, as Robert slept soundly beside me, I slipped out of bed and made my way to my office. Marcus had come through with information about Desert Sun Development LLC. As I'd suspected, it was a shell company, but not one of Patricia's. The real buyer was Clayton Industries, one of the largest mining companies in the country. They must have done their own surveys, discovered what I already knew. Patricia, in her eagerness to control everything, had unknowingly sold a billion-dollar lithium deposit for a fraction of its worth. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Meeting set for tomorrow? 9 a.m. They don't know about the sale yet. I smiled in the darkness. Patricia thought she was teaching me a lesson about power. Instead, she was about to learn one about knowledge. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional suit, a far cry from the cheap clothes Patricia always criticized. Robert had already left for work, probably to report my subdued reaction to his mother. The offices of Clayton Industries were exactly what you'd expect from a mining corporation, all glass and steel and power. I walked in like I belonged there, which in a way, I did. John Clayton himself was waiting in the conference room, along with his chief geological officer and 2 lawyers. Mrs. Mitchell, he said warmly, we've been looking forward to meeting you. Your preliminary reports on the lithium deposits are fascinating. I set my briefcase on the table. Thank you. Though I should mention there's been a slight complication. His eyebrows rose. Oh? Yes. It seems your company, through a shell corporation called Desert Sun Development, purchased my land yesterday, without my knowledge or consent. The room went very quiet. That's concerning, Clayton said carefully. We've been in negotiations to purchase mineral rights for several properties in that region, but I wasn't aware. I pulled out a folder. Here's the sale document, executed through fraudulent power of attorney by my mother-in-law, Patricia Whitman. I've already filed police reports and contacted the SEC. Clayton's lawyers were frantically flipping through papers. His geological officer looked like he might be ill. Mrs. Mitchell. Clayton leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? I smiled. That depends. Would you like to explain why your company tried to secretly buy my land for a fraction of its value? Or would you like to discuss a legitimate partnership that benefits us both? The meeting at Clayton Industries lasted 4 hours. By the time I walked out, I had a preliminary agreement that would change everything. Not just a fair price for the land, but a 40% stake in the mining operation and a seat on the project's executive board. As I drove home, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Patricia, no doubt having learned about my meeting through her network of social connections. I let it ring. She'd discover the truth soon enough. Walking into our house that evening, I found both Patricia and Robert waiting for me. Patricia sat regally in her favorite armchair, while Robert paced nervously. Where have you been? Patricia demanded. I heard the most bizarre rumor about you meeting with John Clayton. It wasn't a rumor, I replied calmly, setting down my briefcase. We had a very productive discussion about the land you sold. Robert stopped pacing. What are you talking about? Why would John Clayton care about that worthless desert? I pulled out the geological surveys, spreading them across the coffee table. Because that worthless desert sits on one of the largest lithium deposits in North America. Worth billions, not the 2 million you so generously accepted. The color drained from Patricia's face as she stared at the reports. You're lying. This can't be real. Oh, it's very real, I said, pulling out more documents. My grandfather wasn't the senile old man you always claimed he was. He was a brilliant geologist who knew exactly what he was leaving me. I've spent the last 5 years quietly confirming his theories and preparing for mining operations. Robert grabbed one of the papers, his hands shaking. But the sale was fraudulent. I finished for him. The power of attorney was forged. The sale was executed without proper authority, and Clayton Industries' attempt to secretly buy the land through a shell company has attracted the SEC's attention. Patricia stood up, her composure cracking. You stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? That sale was perfectly legal. Was it? I pulled out my phone, playing a recording of our conversation from the day before. Her voice filled the room. Power of attorney is such a useful thing, especially when one knows the right people at the right banks. She sank back into her chair, her face ashen. Fortunately, I continued, Clayton Industries has agreed to a legitimate deal, one that makes me a major stakeholder in a multi-billion-dollar mining operation. The fraudulent sale has been nullified, and they're very eager to avoid any negative publicity. Robert stepped forward, attempting a smile. Honey, this is amazing. We're going to be rich. No, Robert. I'm going to be rich. You and Patricia are going to be facing fraud charges unless you agree to my terms. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Terms? I sat down, smoothing my skirt. A divorce, Robert. Quick, clean, and quiet. You admit to the fraud in a sealed statement that will only be revealed if you or Patricia ever try to challenge the divorce settlement. In return, I don't press charges. You can't do this, Patricia hissed. He's my son. Your son who helped you commit federal fraud, I reminded her. How do you think that will look to your society friends, Patricia? To your charity board members? To your country club? The next month was a whirlwind of legal proceedings and business meetings. Robert, faced with evidence of his crimes, signed the divorce papers without contest. Patricia, despite her threats and schemes, couldn't find a way around the recording of her confession. 1 year later, I stood at the groundbreaking ceremony for the lithium mining operation. Cameras flashed as I shook hands with John Clayton, now my business partner rather than my almost defrauder. Remarkable operation you're running here, a reporter commented. How does it feel to be one of the youngest female CEOs in the mining industry? I smiled, looking out over the land my grandfather had left me. It feels like legacy, like vindication, like proof that sometimes the best revenge is success. The lithium mine was just the beginning. Over the next 5 years, I expanded into sustainable energy storage, electric vehicle components, and green technology. Each success built upon the last, turning my grandfather's worthless land into the foundation of a business empire. Patricia, I heard, had to step down from her various charity boards after rumors of her fraud attempt began circulating. Robert moved to another state, his reputation in the business community tainted by his involvement in the scheme. But the real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in the empire I built from their betrayal. 10 years after that fateful day when Patricia smugly announced she'd sold my inheritance, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business leadership conference. The topic? Building billion-dollar businesses from betrayal. As I stood at the podium, looking out over a sea of ambitious faces, I thought about how far I'd come. Success, I begin, isn't about getting revenge. It's about taking the obstacles others put in your path and turning them into stepping stones. My mother-in-law thought she was destroying my inheritance. Instead, she forced me to fight for it, to prove its worth, and to build something bigger than anyone thought possible. After the speech, a young woman approached me. Ms. Mitchell, I read about what happened with your ex-husband and his mother. How did you stay so calm when you discovered their betrayal? I smiled, remembering that day in my kitchen. Because I knew something they didn't, that true power isn't in what you take from others, but in what you build for yourself. That evening, I received a letter forwarded through my lawyers. It was from Patricia. I was wrong, she wrote. About you, about the land, about everything. The empire you've built, it's extraordinary. I know it's too late for apologies, but I want you to know that you proved me wrong in the most spectacular way possible. I folded the letter and added it to my files alongside the original fraudulent sale documents and the geological surveys, a reminder of where I started and how far I'd come. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Mitchell Industries announces revolutionary new battery technology. Another breakthrough, another step forward in the empire I'd built from a piece of worthless desert. Patricia had tried to steal my inheritance, thinking she was protecting her son's future. Instead, she'd unleashed something far more powerful. my determination to succeed not just for myself, but for every person who'd ever been underestimated or betrayed. Looking out from my office window at the sprawling headquarters of Mitchell Industries, I thought about my grandfather. He hadn't just left me land with lithium deposits. He'd left me a chance to prove myself, to build something meaningful, to show the world that sometimes the greatest fortunes come from the things others dismiss as worthless. And that, more than any revenge, was the sweetest victory of all.